In the long history of the NHL, teams come and go. Some burn bright and then just disappear. But what if I told you about a team that vanished after only 2 seasons back in the 70s, but never really left? This is the wild story of the forgotten Kansas City Scouts and how they actually became the foundation for a team you definitely know today.
Okay, so take a look at these two things. What could this super vintage 70s logo possibly have in common with a modern NHL powerhouse? I mean, they look like they're from completely different worlds, right? Different cities, different eras. But here's the kicker. They share a direct, totally unbroken history.
So yeah, that team on the left, that's the Kansas City Scouts. And on the right, of course, you know them, the New Jersey Devils. It sounds crazy, I know, but they are the exact same franchise, just separated by a couple of relocations in about 50 years. So how in the world did one become the other? Let's get into it. All right, to really get this story, we've got to jump in our time machine and head back to the mid-1970s. This was a huge time for the NHL. The league was expanding, trying to plant its flag in new cities all across North America. So, in 1974, the league brought in 2 new teams. One was the Washington Capitals, who are obviously still around, and the other, well, that's our team, a brand new franchise in Kansas City. A group of 22 investors got together and boom, just like that, big-time pro hockey had arrived in Missouri. And the city really rolled out the red carpet for them too. They had a shiny new home, Kemper Arena. This place was a modern marvel at the time, built for both the new hockey team and the NBA's Kansas City Kings. The vibe in the city was just electric. It really felt like Kansas City was ready for the big leagues. But before they could even hit the ice, they needed a name. And the owners had this really clever idea. They wanted to call the team the Kansas City Mohawks. It was a pretty slick play on words, right? You take M.O. from Missouri, and then you add Hawks from Kansas's nickname, the Jayhawkers. Perfect. Well, almost perfect. There was one tiny problem. The Chicago Blackhawks, one of the original 6 teams, they put their foot down. They formally objected, saying Mohawks was way too close to their name. And the NHL actually agreed with them. So that clever name, yeah, it got tossed right out. So what do? They held a contest, let the fans decide, and the public chose the Scouts. The name came from this really famous local landmark, the Scout statue, that kind of overlooks the whole city. And that statue, it became the centerpiece of their logo. It was a really powerful connection to Kansas City's identity. Okay, so the name was set, the arena was brand new, the city was pumped. Everything off the ice looked perfect. But unfortunately, all that promise didn't exactly translate to success on the ice. I want you to just look at this number for a second. 27. Just let that sink in. That is the total number of games the Kansas City Scouts won. Not in one season, in their entire 2-year, 160-game history in the NHL. It was just a brutal, brutal introduction to the league. But here's the truly wild part of the story. It wasn't a total disaster from day one. I mean, in their second season, the 75-76 season, they were actually kind of good for a while. They were competitive. Get this, at the halfway mark, after a win on December 28th, they were just 1 single point out of a playoff spot. You'd think, hey, things are looking up. And then it happened. What came next was one of the most catastrophic collapses in all of sports history. After looking so promising through those first 36 games, the Scouts just completely, totally fell apart. They managed to win only 1 of their last 44 games. 1. It was an epic, unbelievable free fall. So let's look at the numbers. Their first season was rough, for sure. They only got 15 wins. But after that historic collapse we just talked about, their second season was somehow even worse. They finished with just 12 wins and a measly 36 points. They never even got a sniff of the playoffs. So yeah, the on-ice performance was a total disaster. But at the same time, off the ice, the money situation was getting just as bad. Think about it. They're playing in this huge 17,000-seat arena, right? But the Scouts were playing to a sea of empty seats. They were only averaging a little over 8,200 fans a game. That means for every single person who showed up, there was more than 1 empty seat. You just can't run a pro sports team in a half-empty building. The money they were losing, it was becoming completely unsustainable. So you gotta ask why? What caused this perfect storm of failure? It really wasn't just one thing. It was a whole mess of problems. You had the rival WHA Hockey League driving up player salaries, making everything more expensive. The ownership group just didn't have deep enough pockets. The whole Midwest was in an economic downturn. And of course, when you combine a terrible record with nobody showing up to the games, you get a death spiral that's pretty much impossible to escape. So, buried in debt and with basically no local support, the owners were out of options. They had no choice. After just 2 short seasons, the whole Kansas City Scouts experiment was over. In 1976, the team gets sold and packed up, moving to Denver. They get a new name, the Colorado Rockies. But a change of scenery didn't fix things. Not at all. After 6 more losing seasons there, the franchise gets sold again in 1982, and this time it finally lands in New Jersey and is reborn as the team we know today, the Devils. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. For decades, the New Jersey Devils, who became a super successful franchise, basically pretended their past in Kansas City and Colorado just didn't exist. It was like their history started in '82. But lately, that started to change. And the shift has been pretty dramatic, actually. For years, all the media guides and team history stuff said they started in 1982, period. But now, the Devils have been releasing these awesome reverse retro jerseys using the old Scouts colors, and for their 40th anniversary, they called it 40 Years in Jersey, which is this really subtle but super clear nod to the fact that, yeah, their story started way before they got here. It's like they're finally embracing that hidden past. It just leaves you with this fascinating what if, right? What if the Scouts had just managed to win a few more of those games that season? What if they had actually made the playoffs? Could that have been enough to save the team in Kansas City? It's just amazing to think about how the entire history of a major franchise like the New Jersey Devils, and really the whole NHL landscape, could have been completely different, all because of one disastrous losing streak almost 50 years ago.